In high school, my friends and I used to hunt ghosts. During my freshman year, I had become somewhat obsessed with paranormal television shows and the like. I wanted to experience something similar to what the people on TV described in each episode. A few of my friends told me that I was wasting my time, that ghosts weren't real, but a couple others thought it sounded pretty interesting. The first time I had ever gone ghost hunting, I had taken two of my friends along with me who seemed the most interested in going. Luke, the type of kid who sort of went along with whatever was going on in the moment. He was very easygoing and knew how to work a camera, which was a major plus. The other member of our little group was Travis, the self-proclaimed Prince of Darkness. Travis dressed head to toe in black. He was extremely interested in the paranormal, probably more than I was. He just really didn't have the motivation to go investigating on his own. There was a reportedly haunted location in town. It was an old Victorian-era house which had long since fallen into decay. I couldn't find any confirmation on whether the house was truly haunted or not, just rumors and hearsay. The house had been boarded up, and we had gone there long after dark. One of the boarded up windows hadn't been nailed down properly, and that allowed us to peel it back and squeeze through. Once we were all inside, the smell was atrocious. The wood rot, combined with what I could only imagine to be the human waste of squatters, pierced our nostrils. Luke almost vomited on the floor shortly after entering. We walked around this house for hours, asking questions to the empty air and taking a moment to record it on our tape recorders. We huddled together and played the tapes back only to be met with static. The hours dragged on and eventually started to become disheartened over our lack of paranormal evidence. That was until we ventured upstairs to do a final sweep of the house. We had entered one of the bedrooms which had already been cleared out long ago. Standing in a semicircle in the center of the room, we once again asked if anyone was with us. We waited, and waited, and waited. I sighed, wondering if my other friends were right, in that there were no such things as ghosts. In that moment, a chill passed by my neck. It was quite noticeable as there weren't any cold breezes within the house, and we were in the middle of summer. The chilled air sent goosebumps down my back and arms. When suddenly, the door which we had entered slammed shut. Travis released a high-pitched yelp, while Luke and I both took a few steps backwards. I quickly moved over to the door and thankfully it opened without issue. We each made our way out of the foul-smelling mansion and headed back home. That had been the very first time any of us had experienced anything like that. Over the next 2 years, we had investigated a number of locations ranging from abandoned houses to warehouses, caves, and even a derelict factory. While the experiences were scary and uncertain, they were also filled with excitement and intrigue. The last time we had ever gone ghost hunting is the reason why I'm writing this, and the reason why I'll never do it again. I was looking up new locations to investigate our junior year in high school. We had already exhausted all of the places within our own city limits. It wasn't until Travis had called me with a place he found while searching online. It was an abandoned sanitarium 2 cities away. As he told me about it, he mentioned that it was actually used by a few paranormal TV shows back in the day. At first, I wasn't sure about driving such a distance to this location, but his enthusiasm persuaded me. Since it was during our summer vacation, I agreed, and we each began preparing to go investigate this place for ourselves. The day finally arrived and Luke had borrowed his dad's car so we could make our journey. We loaded up our cameras, tape recorders, as well as multiple battery packs just in case. We drove the 4.5 hours to the location. As we pulled up to the outskirts of the sanitarium, the sun was already setting on the horizon. We were forced to park the car quite away from the building due to a large perimeter fence surrounding the entire complex. This fence, I'm assuming, was set up by the city to keep would-be trespassers out. After skirting around the fence for around 20 minutes, we found an area in the fence that had been bent away, probably due to some animal trying to get in or out. We each crawled through and once on the other side began hiking towards the main building. Since the fence was secured, it was only appropriate to assume the main door to the building would be locked as well. After wandering around for any sign of a way in, Luke called us back over to the front door itself. As we walked up to him confused, he shrugged his shoulders, gripped the handle, and with a metal thunk, the main door opened inward. A stale gust of air forced outward, as if the building itself were exhaling after a long time. We all looked to one another and walked inside. The interior of this place, albeit dark, looked very much like an old haunted hospital. Long, narrow corridors split off in every direction. Old wooden doors were spaced intermittently along each one. Broken wood, discarded papers, and bits of glass gave the floor a healthy crunch with each step we made. We took a moment to ready our gear and decided on the best place to investigate first. My two friends looked to me expectantly, and I simply motioned down the main corridor ahead of us. They both nodded and we began walking. As we cautiously pushed forward, unsure of what to expect, we took some time to pop our heads into the various rooms that lined the hallway. Most of the rooms were large barracks, containing numerous bed frames pushed along the walls. We continued onward, unsure of what exactly we were searching for, but stopped when Travis and I noticed Luke had wandered into a room by himself. We followed and were led to a bath area of sorts. 6 rusted metallic bathtubs sat in a line on top of a cracked tile floor. When Travis and I entered, we saw Luke standing over one of these tubs. We walked up to him and both looked into it. In the drain of the tub, an almost gasp-like sound emanated from it. We all looked on curiously. Suddenly, water began to come up into the tub from the drain itself. We watched with wide eyes as in mere minutes the previously empty tub was now filled to the brim with an opaque black liquid. Travis and I both took a step backwards while Luke stared blankly into the water. I watched as an arm, slick with sludge, slowly poke its way out of the water. It extended further and further into the air above. The apparent length of this appendage was far longer than that of a person. In a flash, it lashed out and grabbed Luke's arm. He reeled back, trying to fight against the thing pulling him towards the water. Travis and I both jumped at Luke and struggled to free him. It took both of us pulling on him with all of our might before his arm finally slipped free, and we tumbled onto our backs. We hurried to our feet and turned to make our way to the door we had entered. As we did, the door slowly began to close. We dashed towards it, but it was no use. The door shut before we could reach it. Travis slammed into the door, trying his hardest to open it. We each tried one after another, but the knob wouldn't turn. As we traded off, a sound filled the room behind us. It was the sound of dripping water. I slowly turned and my body seized up. The first thing I noticed was how immense this thing was. Its head was just barely grazing the ceiling above us. Both of its arms seemed to be nearly 6 feet long. It was covered from head to toe in that black sludge that it had crawled out from. The oil-like substance was slowly dripping off its body and pooling at its feet. It was wearing what looked to be some sort of cloth pants that I think were once a pale blue color. The upper half of its body was a bleached white, and it wore no shirt. The torso was sickeningly long, but incredibly thin, like the thorax of an insect. As my eyes trailed up, They grew wider and wider. Its head was humanoid yet elongated, much like the rest of its body. Its lower jaw hung open about 1.5 feet from its upper teeth. Its face had a bluish tint to it, almost like someone who had drowned. The top of its head was completely hairless, yet had numerous lumps all over its scalp. It knelt down and let out a deafening screech which caused us to hold our ears tightly. We all pushed our backs against the wall behind us. In a flash, this thing reached out towards us with its elongated arm. I somehow managed to duck away from it, but Travis wasn't as quick. His leg had gotten grabbed and was now being dragged towards this thing. Luke continued fighting against the door behind us, and I jumped to grab Travis's outstretched hand. The fear in Travis's eyes was unlike anything I had ever seen before, and I'm pretty sure my eyes were projecting the same thing to him. This creature began to drag me along with Travis. I called out to Luke for help, and he quickly jumped onto Travis's other arm. We both struggled against it, as the creature began to lower its massive jaw to the ground. It seemed like he was going to swallow Travis whole. I did the only thing I could think of, and that was to hurl my camera at its face. My camera flew through the air, clattering against its temple before shattering upon the ground. It released Travis, as its eyes affixed themselves onto mine. Once freed, we all sprinted at the door in unison. With our combined mass, we crashed into the door, sending it bursting open. We ran down the hallway towards the front door. As we ran, I could hear the guttural shrieks behind me. I turned and saw this creature forcing its way under the doorframe to follow us. Despite its immense size, it seemed to have no trouble fitting through narrow doorways. We made it to the front door, and thankfully this one opened much easier. We exited out into the night, drenched in sweat and gasping profusely. As we stood there panting, I couldn't believe that we had made it out of there alive. Suddenly, a long clawed hand shot out from the doorway behind us, grabbing my backpack and throwing me to the ground. It began dragging me back into the sanitarium. Travis and Luke both grabbed onto my arms as I screamed for my life. After straining for a few seconds, the nylon straps tore free and my backpack was dragged into the darkness behind me. That ride home was a silent one. We had all narrowly escaped that place with our lives. I told both Travis and Luke that my ghost hunting days were over. They both seemed to agree with my decision. If any of you out there are looking to get into hunting ghosts, I won't tell you not to. Just make sure it's something you truly wish to do. Something that is worth losing your very life over.